I'm going to call the special meeting of the Town Council to order. We're going to take a moment of reflection, as we normally do. Thank you. So I'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to ask Councilman Greg Stipes if he would do the honor.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have a public hearing scheduled tonight, and the purpose is to discuss water and sewer rates for the fiscal year 2017-2018. Mr. Wingfield, do you have any opening remarks on this?
Just to let you know, the proposed water and sewer rates are our best attempt at covering expected rate increases due to the upgrades at the water authority plant, and also meeting the town's capital needs in regards to our own wastewater treatment facility, service lines, pump stations, storage tanks, and other items that must be maintained to ensure safe and reliable sources of water and disposal of sanitary sewer. After many iterations, we presented rates that keep the typical bill increases in the 25% neighborhood and actually encourage conservation with 1,000-gallon users seeing a decrease of $5 in their monthly water bill and $6 in their typical monthly sewer bill. And we do feel these are basically the best options available. We still will subsidize from general fund with the rollover of unexpended fund balance. But we'll continue to do that with the goal of ceasing that over time.
Okay. Very good. So it's, I will tell you, has not been an easy thing for council to talk about and to get together on. It's been, I mean, the rates have been all over anywhere between 40 and 70%, and then now it's finally down to the 25%, which is a lot more palatable for those of us that are on fixed incomes, and there's 3 or 4 of us up here at the table that way, so we feel your pain. Is there anyone here that would like to address this issue? Barbara, questions?
I have a question.
It's Barbara Middleton.
Yeah, in regard to this upgrades that you're talking about, I'd like a little bit of explanation of, you were, I guess, changing a lot of the pipes and things like that. I know it's also to do with wastewater. There's several different projects that this is covering. My question is this done in stages? Will the replacement of the pipes or whatever you're having to do, I guess, for purposes of beyond your control, will that be done in sections, or how will that be handled?
You know, it's the main and the most pressing need is to upgrade the water supply system out off of 114. It has not been upgraded. It was built in 1952. Has not been upgraded since the early 70s, and they have kept it together with baling wire and duct tape and spit for years. And if just to the point now, there's about $25 million work that needs to be done in order to protect. That's the only source of water we have coming into town. Now, that the $25 million, we split that 4 ways between Christiansburg, Blacksburg, Montgomery County, and Virginia Tech. So we're not footing the whole bill. We're part of an authority. There are 4 municipalities, 3 municipalities and a school that are involved in this, and it supplies water to all of them. So that was the main cause. We do see down the road that we're going to have to do some sewage treatment plant work. It's getting a little bit, it's still serviceable, but it's getting a little shaky, and we know down the road we're gonna have to address it. I think that, you know, I'm not sure I'm not sure, Wayne, I'm going to ask Wayne Nelson, who's on that board. The water lines is going to be replacing, or is there is a lot of the equipment inside the water authority?
The Water Authority, that project is the plant itself. It's been, I think, close to 40 years since it had any major work done. And, you know, it's served us well over all these years. I think the staff there did a great job in keeping costs down and overhead down and keeping it running. But there comes a point when the old car just won't run anymore, and we need to trade it in. So we got a major
but no,
upgrade.
the water lines, they're usually kept up fairly well as best we can.
Yes, part of the projects are the joinder. Those are planned projects. The projects in town here, I'll address that. We have phased those. We staff would like to be a little more aggressive with it, but we understand that we have to find the balance, and we do phase projects, and that's reflected in our capital improvement plan.
Okay.
Wayne, the upgrading of the plant, what was the price tag on that?
The mayor was correct, in the 25 million range, yes, sir.
Did you hear that, ma'am? 25 million to upgrade this plant, and it's going to be divided into four ways.
Four
but
areas.
still, yeah. 25 million is 25 million.
And Miss Middleton, the way Middleton, correct?
Correct.
And I think you and I probably speak the same language. I went out there to kind of get an understanding because I don't swim in that pool. Wayne does. I have to go to him to help me to understand. And at one particular incident, I think that Henry and I both went over there, and we toured the entire facility. We're on the water and sewer liaisons here for the town council. And they have a very good administrator, Caleb, that's over there. I think a lot of him, he speaks my language as well. He can dumb it down for me, which is hard to do. And he took us through pretty much every single step and every single phase of what they needed to do to upgrade, to remediate, to refurbish. And a couple of times we were shown some areas which I look at and I think it looks pretty good. And he looks at it from an engineering perspective and says, Court, actually that's not so good, and this is why. And the big thing is he was able to tell me why. Not just that we need to replace it, but this is the reason why we're worried about this going forward, why it's important for us to take this particular, put this particular plan of action in place. And he explained it very, very well. I will tell you that what I took from that, aside from him knowing that facility very, very well, and the engineers that are there that have been there for many, many years, so they're really well versed, is that some of the facility, if you will, some of the engineering within is dated. And I hate to say antiquated, that's a bad word we use, but it's older, which means a lot of the parts you can't even get anymore. And the reason why the place is still so successful is because a lot of the original engineers are still present. So they're used to working on that particular project or that particular piece. And so they've really, Mayor jokes about the baling wire and the spit and the gum and whatever. But the reality is we don't have those people. We probably take this action years before, and it takes us, we probably implemented this 5 or 10 years ago. So that kind of resonated with me quite a bit. I will tell you as well is that this came as a shock, at least I can say for myself. I think I can speak probably everybody up here. About a year and a half ago when we had the meeting in Blacksburg, it was kind of everybody came together and then they told us from the board at the Water Authority what we needed to expect. And it wasn't within my contemplation at the time. It blew me away. And the figures they were throwing around, the $25 to $50 million type figures, were not something I was looking at, something that I had not even thought of that walking in. And so, of course, the authority says we need to do this, and the authority is the authority, and again, we're a member of it, and so they come up with their plan of action, and of course, the way they raise their money, obviously, they sell the water to us, and they have a particular phase, if you will, of what they're doing year to year to year. And what we've tried to do as council, and Mr. Stipes really has a lot to do with this. He really led the charge. Mr. Nelson speaks true. The town would like to be more aggressive. I think we've kind of unfortunately put some skids on things only because we look at the fixed income issues in town, and the raising of the rates, the original projection, the projections and the original plans. I think we went through 8 or 9 different plans. We've asked for that many, if you will, just changes and modifications, and we've tried to get it down to where it's the minimal. But the reality is, though, it's phased out the cost increase over a period of years. But we're still supplementing as a town a lot of, in other words, what the water authority charges us for water and we pass along to you, we still pay as a town more than what we charge our customer, like the citizens, to supplement that, to offset, and we're trying to bring that a little bit more into a zero sum, zero loss, and we're also eating a lot of those capital improvements. In my layman's term, the way I looked at it, it was two parts. The phasing will happen over a period of years, but first and foremost, it was to create a facility that we know is going to be operational in the future, and that's going to be sufficient and efficient. But from just a consumer standpoint, when I turn my faucet on, I expect there to be water. If I have to flush my toilet, I expect there to be water. It's the expectation I have, which is a good expectation. It means we're doing things really well. But at the end of the day, it seemed like the one thing we were missing, and this is part of the Joinder study, was that we don't have a lot of redundancy. And I know that's a word, I didn't know what that meant. All that means is having what I consider to be a secondary source. In other words, we have a problem in one, you still got water coming from another. And that's some of these other projects that are proposed, is to allow us redundancy within the town. And as what I call a water authority community, because we're kind of all four of us together, VPI, Blacksburg, Christiansburg, and the county. And so it took a lot for me to understand it, and it's a lot to swallow. And the first numbers we got were 60 and 70% increases in water rates for users of, say, 2,000 gallons. And it was like a lead balloon going over. And again, Mr. Stipes was instrumental in modifying that. And now we're down into again, palatable might be the wrong word, but it's a little bit more at least serviceable where someone can maybe try to plan. I will tell you, as a town, we had, I think, requested Mr. Nelson to take to the board that we wanted them to phase these increases so that we could pass along slower and smaller phases to our community. And the authority, which voted, I think we were the only dissenting vote in the town of Christiansburg, voted they wanted to be much more rapid, and they wanted to do these things now. And again, they understand that's their trade. But we're still, even though they're doing it rapidly, we're still going to phase things slowly or more slowly so that we pass along those increases as slow as we can to the consumers. That's the way, again, me and my wife, when we looked at it, tried to understand it, that's kind of the understanding that we came up with. So, again, that's a layman's perspective on things, and maybe it's not the right one, or if anybody needs to upgrade that, but that's kind of the way that I looked at it, because it was so difficult for me to understand those massive, massive figures.
So this 25%, is that the fiscal year this year? It's going in July. Is that this fiscal year you're speaking of? Then the way I read, I understood in 2018, like January, we will have another increase, right?
My expectation, ma'am, to be honest with you, is that we're going to experience an increase each of the next 5 years.
That's what I thought.
And again, I'm not going to mislead you, because that's...
You will eventually get your
right.
75%.
Right, and the difference is that originally we had again, they wanted to do a large upfront, which is kind of what the authority's doing. It's a large upfront increase amount that we would then pass along. Frankly, we just decided not to pass along that increase amount. So whereas we as a town are going to still be paying a lot more for the water, we're going to be passing along a much smaller percentage of that to the consumer. We can't, we don't control what we buy from the authority, the rate. They control that. What we only control is what we pass along. Again, that's the way that I understand it. Mr. Nelson, Mr. Wingfield, if I'm wrong.
Barbara, I think also we're working on the 2018 budget. So whatever increase is in this budget should stay in effect until we start working on the 19
July
budget.
of next year.
So it's a year. It's a year.
During the 2018 is what I meant.
Well,
Yes, ma'am.
it'll be July 2018,
From
right?
one year to the
Work
next,
off a 12-month budget.
to the next year, and so forth, right?
Right.
That it'll eventually. Now, Virginia Tech, you said Virginia Tech and Blacksburg, they do their
And the
share
county.
And Montgomery
separately,
County.
and the
County.
county.
Yes, ma'am.
Those are the four main, those are the four.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Like the town aquatic center and things like that use a lot of water. Who gets the biggest part? Who pays for that? Is that through a town budget? Who pays for it?
The aquatic center, ma'am?
It's part of the general revenue, which is
Yes.
meals tax, lodging tax, real estate tax.
Okay.
But surprisingly, correct me if I'm wrong, they really don't use as much water as you would think.
That's the original water in that.
That's the original water that's in the aquatic center right now. 1 million gallons we put in 6 years ago. Now they're constantly upgrading it some, but it's not like we drain it once a month and fill it back up.
And Ms. Melton, one thing too I'd mention to you is that when we first got, I wish I had a screen I could draw on. I had to draw when I talk. When we first got our figures, where I showed you that it was like 60 or 70%, it was grouped along the the most common users that we have in town, basically the 2, 3, and 4,000 gallon users. So that was, it's like if you can imagine a sine curve, it was kind of the sine curve with the apex being the 2, 3, and 4,000 gallon user, and then it kind of went back down. What we've also tried to do, I think, by pushing down that top of that sine curve, it pretty much makes everything try to equalize. So what you're looking at now, at least my understanding is, it's more along the lines of the same level of increase regardless if you're using 10,000 gallons or 2,000 gallons. It's more spread apart, and that way not one particular segment is frankly eating the majority of the increase. It's to try to equalize those equities, if you will. That's another thing, again, that we, I think, as a group tried to look at. This was not it's not a clean, I hate to say clean glass of water. It was hard to swallow this, in other words. And but again, I do give a lot of credit to Mr. Nelson for having explained it to me more times than he should have. But it's just very difficult for me to understand it, not being an engineer.
You know, ma'am, you maybe see, you've seen it in the paper, I think it was in the article was in there this morning, and it states, you know, Christiansburg upping the water. And I think there have been several articles like that, and maybe if you've read that, you might just feel like it is just Christiansburg that is changing their water rates. But that's not going to be the case. You know, all four of these different entities are going to have to raise their rates. And I think that maybe we are just a little bit ahead of the game right now in determining how these are going to be done. And maybe in the coming future, you're going to see, well, this is what Blacksburg's going to do, but everybody's going to have to do something to pay this bill.
It's been very confusing because I've read different articles from Montgomery News saying lowering to the Roanoke Times that says 70-some%, and then I read another article. I've read them thoroughly. I've read the articles.
You know,
and my understanding is the only lowering you'll see from the water or sewer, I believe, is the 1,000-gallon users. And the reason, again, for that, in my opinion, is we're trying to hit or help as much as we can individuals who are on a fixed income, who are not receiving increases from the state or federal government. If they're on a fixed and they're all of a sudden paying 20-30% more, that's a substantial cut into their home budget and household budget. And so, and as far as what Mr. Winkle said about conservation, I mean, anybody on that cusp, it does reinforce that to try to basically give that incentive. It's almost like it's not a real program, but it's an incentivization program in and of itself because of the rate decrease. I think it's a $5 to $7 decrease. Mr. Wingfield, help me out.
It's $11 total.
With water and sewer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Randy, do you have extra
Do you have copies of this, Chris?
usage?
Does
Our attorney have these copies at their?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ms. Milne, they can, somebody take that from us. At least I would assume the water sewer fund support past 10 years. Residential, non-residential customers usage, and then, of course, the fee schedule.
and Barbara, you asked me this morning, this afternoon, water users that live outside of our corporate limits will pay a higher rate.
Yes. Like
Oh, absolutely.
They pay a higher rate than you said you have a neighbor that's.
Yeah, my property joins their property, the back.
Yeah, right.
I live in Gables at Kensington.
Yeah.
They live on Harkerator Street.
Oh,
They
that's
don't pay the storm water drainage fee that I pay. And then I understand that they won't have the increase, right?
They will have more so than what you're getting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they did.
Is that through the county will be
Town.
raising?
If they're using
With
town
rate,
water,
right.
which I assume that they are,
They're using town water.
Then it's through us.
Yes.
I think the way again, my non-engineering basis to understand it is any water that flows through our town pipes that serves a non-town customer,
Right.
we charge an additional amount. And I always use this
So
term.
the town does that?
Yes, ma'am. And Mr. Nelson needs to correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's called a wheeling rate.
It's on your sheet
Am I wrong?
too. One of the sheets that shows
If you're a
non-residential.
town
Yeah.
customer,
Yes.
using our town service lines, it's 150% of the rate. The wheeling fee is what we charge the county PSA when we sell water directly to them, which they distribute to their customers.
Okay, so that would be going to the county. So even I stand corrected then.
Ms. Middleton,
Yes.
and she is Mrs. Middleton, dear Ms.
Yeah,
Middleton.
and you.
And I want to just make a couple comments. Mr. Barber talked about the importance of the water plant. There is no plan B for our water source. That is it. And sort of like an aircraft, every certain thousand miles, flight miles, it might be 10,000 or 20,000 flight miles, these big jet engines these big jet airplanes that you see, they're completely rebuilt. they reach a point, and FAA sets those standards and says that after you've had a number of flight hours, you have to completely rebuild those engines. That's why the planes last so long. The same applies to our water plant, and those are typically on a 20-year cycle, to where we go in and do an extreme makeover and upgrade everything. In addition to, there's no plan B for getting water, there are also safety concerns. We've actually been very fortunate not to have any deaths at the water plant, because the way the pumps are situated, and there's a pretty high risk of what's called arc flashing, which is where you get lightning bolts basically between pumps. And there are some safety things that need to be addressed out there too. And so I just want to emphasize what Mr. Barber said. There's no plan B for our water source. If that system fails out there, we all lose. We're all losers.
Yeah, we have
And so
nothing. We have nothing to back it up.
We have to do that, and we have vetted this extremely, and Mr. Wingfield said this is the best option here, and I would propose to you that it's not the best option. The best option is that we don't have to raise rates. That's the best option. But of everything we've looked at, this is the least worst option to get what we need, to accomplish what we need to accomplish, to allow, or to make sure that people have safe water to drink, and are able to flush their toilets and not have to worry about what happens after that. And Mr. Hall mentioned the redundancy. There are also, with this upgrade, there are also going to be additional lines, sipping straws, to get the water to us, so that if one line breaks, then the town or a section of town is not out of water because we're getting it from another direction, to put it in simple terms. So we're upgrading the plant, and we're also upgrading our system to provide some additional loops that'll make sure that our customers always can turn on the sink or turn on the faucet and get the water. But I do want to say, what we're looking at here, I do believe, is the least worst solution for getting to being able to provide the service that people depend on. And it's not been an easy decision. But anyway.
I understand about upgrades and things. It's better to go along and be doing it along rather than waiting 20 or 30 years and having to go in. It's like updating your home. You do a few things along rather than doing a master, everything remodeled in, say, 20 years. I understand all that part. I had one question. This may not be, when we have new buildings, like in my development, they are going up house after house. When they actually, the contractors or an individual connects to the town water and sewer, I know that's a certain fee that they pay to do that. I'm not sure what it is.
$4,000.
$4,000. Okay, thank you. I was trying to find that out, and I've never been able to find it out. With all these homes, does that go into a special fund where it should go to redo your pipes and all that, rather than going into a general expenditure fund? How does that work with the funds?
It goes into the Water Enterprise Fund. So it's basically included as, I guess, to help cover water and sewer expenses.
Earmark funds.
Yeah, that is all water sewer. We have a general fund, and we have an enterprise fund, which is water and sewer.
Okay.
It all goes to that.
It's projected in the
It
income.
looks like with all this.
And it's on page 2 of that.
Okay,
one of those
yeah, I
sheets
just
they have.
haven't had a chance to read all this.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot to it.
It's really interesting.
But I just want to,
I'll play dumb now, I'll read it when I get home.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, I was just wondering, with all this building and the funds, it looks like they would have lots of fund in case they need upgrades and things. Is that not what those funds go to for, I should say?
The water connection fees?
Yes, water connection fee.
They go into the general enterprise fund, so yes, it does help to cover capital projects, although you could also argue that it is also used to offset rates to some degree also.
That's what I was wondering, because they have built, going to put many homes right across from where I live now. They have been like several hundred, I guess.
and Ms. Milton, you talked about instead of one large project every 20 years, do a little bit at a time. That's our goal here on council for our sewer treatment plant, is not to wait 20 years for a large fix like this. And that's one of the things we have to look at too, when you look at small increases in your sewer, is because we want to do those upgrades sooner rather than one large, one later. So that is part of it as well. Am I right on that?
Correct.
And Mr. Wingfield, I don't know if this document here, I'm looking at the general fund, the supplementing fund, is just, if I'm reading this correctly, under the present budget 2018, the general fund support for that enterprise fund, which is, again, what we're trying to equalize, is that the 2.7 is what's going to come out of the general fund just to offset what otherwise we're incurring as an expense that we're not passing along?
Yes,
And that's expected to be 2.7 million this year.
and that's actually coming out of the unassigned fund balance, basically for capital.
capital projects,
sewer
right.
projects.
Right.
So we feel, Barbara, that we have thought this thing through as well as we can and reached, as Brad said, not the best one, but it's certainly
It's better than the original statement.
exact thing,
no
yes.
comparison.
75%.
It created a lot of panic, didn't it?
Yeah, yes, it did.
And Ms. Mills?
About the maximum amount to start with.
And you know,
Sounds like you're getting a good deal, really.
That gets good.
It's kind of like taking off a Band-Aid. Is you want to take it off in one big shriek or just in a series of groans? It's kind of what we're doing with
I
it.
just wanted to understand. I like to understand.
Harry, Harry, do you have a question for Ms. Middleton?
Yes, sir. Once we heard about it, Mr. Hall was right. We were all in shock, seriously. And one question I had that night, I said, what happens if your present system wouldn't work anymore? And he said, nobody would have any water in the whole Newer Valley. So we have no choice,
and you're talking about fees, people say, well, the town is increasing fees, and the town is doing that. But really, we buy this from a wholesaler, really. And, they pass, if they're gonna raise their rates or something like that, then that comes to us, and then we have to raise the rates. And I think right now that the amount of money that we are collecting for water does not cover the whole thing. I'm not sure how much.
Well, that's the 2.7 million figure that we're supplementing this year.
So, I mean,
We hope eventually to get it to at least a balance, to a break even.
And I think under the current, the structure, Ms. Tweedy, is it around 5 years we'll be there, 5 or 6 years?
Yeah.
So in 5 or 6 years, we're slowly, again, bridging that particular, what is right now a chasm of 2.7 million, frankly. Hopefully we can get that to a gap in a few years.
And we have sweated this a lot.
We really have.
Yeah.
Lots going on.
Barbara, I've heard from you. How about Betty? Are you,
She's been,
you've been prodding? Okay. Are you whispering in her ear? Okay. Have we answered as well as we can?
Yeah.
And we certainly, if you have any other questions, Barbara, you certainly know how to get in touch with me or any of the rest of us. And I may not know the answer exactly when you ask me, but as you see, I can find you and tell you.
right. Yeah. That's good answers.
And they are all separate fees. I mean, water, sewer, and then your stormwater, because you mentioned that
Right.
before it started. That is separate from the water and sewer.
Yeah.
And the garbage and whatever, so. Anyway.
And we're glad you're here because if you got questions, lots of people outside of here have the same questions. So.
I thought of several of them
Yeah.
had questions in the neighborhood that they didn't show up. So. I was the only one to show up.
That's okay. And we do appreciate it. Barbara, you know that. You know that. Is there anyone else to address this issue on our public hearing? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing. We are scheduled to, if needed, to go into we're going to adjourn the session. We're going to go into a work session. Is that correct? You might need a minute or two break.